Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I am really glad that you're here. Today I wanted to delve into something that is an emotional topic that touches the lives of many, and that is the challenges that can be faced when your partner has endured a very traumatic childhood. Every individual and relationship is unique, but understanding some of the pitfalls can be the first step to overcoming them. Childhood is the prime time for brain development and the time when people typically learn to have healthy attachments and a stable sense of love and security. But when somebody experiences something traumatic during childhood, it can actually interrupt their brain development and change their sense of healthy relationship. However, survivors of childhood trauma, abuse, or neglect have a harder time forming healthy relationships because of their negative views of the people who have hurt them in the past. There are three really sad ways that this trauma can play out in relationships, and while these are not all of them, these are three that significantly impacted me and my marriage, as well as other wives that I talked to. The first one is trust issues. Traumatic early experiences can make it hard for someone to trust as an adult, even those that they care deeply about. This protective mechanism may make them hesitant to share their feelings or even to be very suspicious of others. And as a partner, you may find that your husband has difficulty expressing his emotions, that he becomes suspicious of your actions or even your intentions. And it's not because they don't love or care about you. It's a defensive mechanism that they developed in order to survive their childhood. If someone's been hurt before, especially in those vulnerable childhood years, it's only natural for them to want to protect themselves from heartbreak again. The second sad way that can play out in relationships is difficulty in regulating emotions. Unresolved trauma can leave someone on constant high alert, leading to intense reactions like anger or impulsivity over seemingly small triggers. We now know that early childhood trauma does affect the brain, and this puts them on high alert for danger at all times. And this can magnify their anxiety and emotions to situations that others would find as normal. These outbursts are usually the direct result of those traumatic experiences where the person reacts defensively even when there's no present danger. The third mechanism that may make it really hard to be in a healthy relationship is low self-esteem and self-worth. Survivors often look at themselves with disgust, shame, or a feeling that they're unlovable. This shame and blame is really deep, and it took me quite a while to realize just how much my husband was suffering from feeling like he didn't deserve my love or the love of his family. And this came across in a very defensive way, and it was very difficult for him to put these feelings into words. And this feeling of unworthiness and disconnect is all this childhood trauma causing a ripple effect throughout their relationship. But just because you're seeing these things in your relationship doesn't mean that this has to be the way that things stay. You can get through these different defense mechanisms together as a couple. And the reason I know this is because 8 years ago, my husband and I were experiencing these defense mechanisms. And unfortunately, I didn't know what the reason for it was at the time. My husband's shame and guilt for what happened to him was so strong that we were several years into our marriage before my husband was able to reveal to anyone for the first time about his history of childhood abuse at the hands of the church. And it was only when my husband realized that he had to deal with these things that happened to him, or he was on the brink of losing everything. So fast forwarding to current day, my husband and I have made it through that crisis phase of the trauma recovery process. It was not easy. It requires patience and understanding and just sheer resilience. But we have been able to make it through, and now we are in a happy and healthy relationship that we're both proud of. So I want to give you real practical approaches towards these 3 mechanisms that you may be seeing. But today, I want to specifically talk about how my husband and I were able to build more trust. And if this is something that you find interesting, then the next 2 weeks, I will be addressing the other 2 issues and the ways that my husband and I were able to deal with them. Okay, so how do you build trust in your relationship with someone who is protecting themselves? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to educate yourself. Understanding trauma, its effects, and its coping mechanisms can make you more empathetic and effective in your interactions. Because your husband's brain is always on high alert, he is misinterpreting your normal actions as a personal attack or trigger due to their continuous scanning for danger. This results in many different responses, but these can create intense cycles of distance and then somebody being defensive and then creating more distrust in your relationship, which is just a vicious cycle that you want to end up turning into a different healthy pattern. The good news is that the more that you get to know about the emotions and triggers in your particular relationship, the better you get at identifying them and finding healthier ways to deal with them. The second thing that you can do to create more trust in your relationship is to be consistent. Being reliable and predictable helps create a sense of safety, and this is so necessary for someone who has never felt safe. And this is something that I just really did not understand the impact of. That when I said I was going to be somewhere, I needed to be there. If I said I was going to do something, if I followed through, this made huge strides in us being able to create more connection and to get closer. So there were times when I felt like I needed to protect my husband and maybe not tell the entire story. And what I found was that this was not the case, that the more that I confided in my husband and the more that I kept him apprised of things that may trigger him, I actually found that we became closer and had a safer relationship. The third thing that you can do is to avoid making assumptions. Don't assume you know what they're feeling or experiencing. Instead, ask open-ended questions and listen to their responses. I really had to give up and let go from being able to have my husband explain to me exactly what was triggering him and why it was triggering him and how it felt. I just found that he was not able to put words to those things, and it was enough for me to just be there, to let him know that I loved him no matter what, and that I didn't ask a lot of why questions. I'm really hoping that you found this discussion helpful. I hope that it gave you some hope that there are things that you can do, some really practical things that you can do to start building that trust in your partner. It's not easy and it requires patience and diligence, but it can be restored. If today's discussion resonates with you, I invite you to sign up for my weekly newsletter. In the next edition, we're going to delve deeper into the other sad way that trauma plays out in adult relationships that we discussed, and that is the difficulty in regulating emotions. As you know, you may be on a roller coaster right now, but there are some things that you can do in order to make that roller coaster a little bit less steep.